The Deep Homie Guide to the 21st Century.
Deep homies across the world, welcome back to the Deep Homie Guide to the 21st Century. Today is April 13th, 2021, and I hope you're having a bright and sunny spring day wherever you are, whether that's actually the weather or whether that's just your spirits. Welcome back to another week of the Deep Homie Guide, where we like to talk about we're starting to talk about the intersection of human beings, our culture, and our world, and trying to be a better person, all that other stuff with tech. It's been the trajectory of this show. We've talked a lot about cryptocurrency. We've talked a lot about social media censorship. And this week's episode is one of my good friends from my college days, my Vassar College days. His name is Sam Williams, and he now works as a software engineer, computer programmer in Baltimore. He's going to talk to us just a little bit about a slightly more technically informed perspective on computers, on the internet, on blockchain. He's going to explain why he's a little bit bearish on blockchain, different opinion than what we've had so far on this show. And he'll tell you why. He'll tell you a lot about DDoS attacks, what we can do about targeted advertisement, and how we can stay encrypted on the web, and what sort of apps we might want to turn to if we are concerned about having our data mined and sold to big advertisers, as it's done with the regular business model of social media, Facebook, what have you. So without further ado, here's my conversation with the illustrious Sam Williams. All right, Sam Williams, what's going on, brother? How you doing, man?
Not much. Glad to be on the show. Just, another day in the life of quarantine.
Yes, welcome to the Deep Homie Guide to the 21st Century. And I'm broadcasting here in Syracuse, New York. And you and I are pinging back and forth. You're down in Baltimore.
Yep, South Baltimore.
Yeah, man. Well, you and I have been friends for a long time, and going all the way back to the college days.
True. Goes back to Professor Murray, philosophy, 101 or whatever.
My God.
Writing all the entire class notes up on the board. You got to copy it down. You don't know what it says. You can't read it, but you got to get that down because that's the notes for the class.
Dude, how true. I mean, that was really like a Byzantine freaking class. Like it was all about trying to decode his handwriting. And you had to, basically what it was is he'd have it all filled out for you on the whiteboard when you got in. You start trying to copy it, but you're like, is that an A or an E? Or is that a Y or a Z? And then you just kind of have to just pay attention as he talks, as he decodes it for you in real time.
Maybe that's his secret strategy to get people to pay attention, but I don't know. I was much more of a letter by letter than word by word approach for me.
Do you remember when he just towards the end of the semester, when everything was whatever, towards Thanksgiving, he just disappeared for a while, and they're like, oh yeah, he went to India.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember
doesn't
that,
surprise me.
You don't remember that?
It may have been classes I was not attending anyway.
Oh God, freshman year. Missed those days of insane spontaneity and just and rigmarole. But now we're here in the adult world, dude. You're a computer programmer now, or software engineer, right?
Yes, software engineer. That is my title. But yeah, I don't know. It was a special place in time and geography, but I think for the most part, things improve year by year as you get older. You just gotta look harder at it.
Well, I'm not even upset. I'm happy with my life right now. It's hard to beat the bliss of the belligerence of freshman year at college.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
It's hard to just beat that, but you can't really live there forever in that space, because it's sort of like, if you're trying to be an adult trying to just stay like that, it's not gonna, you're probably gonna be like a crackhead or something. It's not really gonna work out.
Well, so unlike you, I actually did attend some college courses a little bit later, in my 20s, and I gotta say, it's kind of weird.
Well, you're hanging out, you're brushing shoulders with kids almost, when you're 26,
yeah.
7.
So this was a state school course, so it's not as uncommon to not just go boom, 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 4 years, you're done. But it's definitely weird. You're just sitting there in class and there's some 17-year-old next to you.
Yeah.
Person can't even go to the liquor store.
Well, it's is it I mean, it probably is. It's almost honestly probably better because there's probably less distraction. You're like, I can't talk to her. That'd be creepy. So I got to actually just pay attention to this work.
I got much better grades my final years in college.
I feel like if I went back now, I'd be like just A+ in it, dude, because I would have no distractions. All I wanted to do was I wanted distractions when I was at Vassar. It was just
exactly.
It was just a matter of experimentation and spontaneity. And I mean, it was fun. I mean, look, there were some good classes here and there, I'll always remember, but I don't know. If I go back in time, I probably would have told myself just to pay more attention, with the classes, but I don't even know if that I would or not. Cause it's just like the social part was almost as fun. I don't know.
I mean, you can kind of learn the same stuff. This is my take anyway about education. I think like above a certain, not even very high bar, you kind of learn the same stuff at all the schools. Maybe like different focuses if they're like technical or like liberal arts or whatever. You're not really paying to learn more stuff when you go to a school like Vassar. It's about like everything outside the classroom.
No, that's true.
It's a good return on money, but it's something.
It's that's true. I mean, all you really need these days is a YouTube account and a library card, and that gives you access to 96% of everything ever.
It's true.
So, I mean, you probably don't even need the library card really, but if you'd have to do.
No, you really don't.
But you have to do.
Well, unless you don't have a computer.
Bro, literally at this point, if you can squeeze together $120, you get something that worked, even if it wouldn't be fast. I mean, and phones these days, these are supercomputers practically. I mean, I guess like a high-end one like this is definitely a supercomputer, but you could get a shitty one for $100, $200. That would still pull up Wikipedia.
Well, there are limitations, of course, but we don't have to get deep in the weeds on that.
Well, what do you mean by limitations?
Well, okay. I mean, this is a technical show, sure. So, I mean, one of the things you often do in like a good CS program at school is like you'll be writing and compiling programs on a computer.
Yeah.
So not all like architectures, which is like the design of the processor inside of the device. There's not necessarily a compiler to run code on all of those devices.
Oh, I see.
In particular, if you want to learn about, say, Intel x86 assembly language, which is essentially what runs on all these like desktops and laptops, you can't run that code on a phone.
Oh, I understand now. I'm sorry.
I'm getting in the weeds a bit.
I was thinking about the context of
learning,
like liberal arts, or what you were saying, the general college education where you're learning about writing and general, whatever.
Oh, for sure. I mean, for
skills and quantitative skills. But you're right. If you're going to go for a CS education, you're going to need specific hardware. Would an M1, the new Apple software chips, the M1, would you be able to run that Intel language on that?
No. So that's actually, that's part of what makes that news a very big deal. In part for people like me, I work at a company where we support our software on Mac and Windows. It's not like a terrible hardship, but we do suddenly have to do a whole lot of testing to see that our code compiles correctly for this different architecture. Mm-hmm. Like if you take like, I don't know, say the regular Mac version of Vectorworks from a few years ago and you try to run it on an M1, like I think they have some kind of emulation mode so it can kind of work, but it will not be the optimal experience.
I believe it must have some sort of emulation mode because I know you can still, like the new M1 chips, hypothetically very fast, and it's for software that's like optimized for it, like Apple software, Final Cut, Logic, and all that. It's lightning speed, but it's like you can still run Adobe products, but it's going to be like there's like lags and problems at this time. So
yeah, but eventually everyone will make native builds for that. At least all the big companies will, and it will run fast. There's some exceptions that like Intel's and AMD processors are better for, but very kind of niche things using special instructions.
All right, well, let's just get right into it then, because let's start with the first question. Like, we're going into the 21st century. The technology is so much more pervasive now than ever, and it's kind of insane. It's kind of cool that you ended up studying software and computer science in the sense that like you're a little bit fluent in this in all this tech that's surrounding us. Like, yo, if my phone stopped working, if my car even stopped working, which has a computer in it, even an old car has a computer in it. Like, I don't have any silicon engineering. Like, I wouldn't know what the hell to do. Like, we're increasingly surrounded by things we have no idea how to fix or how to how to deal with. At least you have some of that knowledge. But whatever. What is a computer, Sam? And why is it so important now? What the fuck is a computer?
Well, so you can let me know how deep you want to get into this, but I think the simplest explanation you can give that's like still kind of correct is a computer is just like a box that does exactly what you tell it to do. And I mean exactly in like the sense of like a petulant child where like you give them an instruction, but like you weren't quite precise enough, and just to resist, like the child like does the most ridiculous literal interpretation of what you said.
Okay,
like,
so
that is what a computer is.
So it's the peanut butter and jelly sandwich thought experiment that everybody did in sixth grade. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we did that in some kind of computer class in high school, actually. And the teacher just stands up there and like just does like stupid smears peanut butter all over the desk or whatever.
Oh, you said spread it. You said spread it. You're like, you are the most petulant individual of all time.
But
okay.
I think you can go kind of far with that idea. Everything that goes wrong with the computer is a result of a human not being specific enough in telling it what to do.
And those instructions, would you call that an algorithm? Would you call that code?
Yeah, an algorithm is a certain, I forget exactly the definition of algorithm years ago in school.
Well, don't worry, it's not a test.
But yeah, that's all fair to call. Although when I say instructions, I'm usually talking about actual like programming language that the processor understands itself, that humans don't usually write code in that language.
And the code, it's ultimately going to be a series of ones and zeros, right? Binary.
Yes.
It's going to translate to that for the computer, because that's really all a computer knows is on off, and those iterations of on off can create everything digital.
Yeah, pretty much. Although the thing that I think a lot of people miss when they say like, computers only understand ones and zeros. I mean, they understand. You understand that like binary, like decimal, all this is just sort of arbitrary ways to like write numbers down.
Mm-hmm.
In certain ways, like binary is natural to a computer, but a lot of like all the rules about manipulating integers that like we understand when we do math, like the computer works in a very similar way. You can write the number as binary, as octal, which is like a base 8 system. But yeah, we're getting in the weeds.
So you're saying that computers also, in addition to the binary code, kind of can perform functions somewhat, is sort of what you're saying? Or are you saying functions are a rendition of?
I'm de-emphasizing the binariness of computers.
Okay. Well, when you get on the internet, right, the internet protocol, and you send out this stream to you, the packets are like the switched packets. It's just sending out different bits of information, and those are ones and zeros. Like my image right now and my audio, that does get translated to ones and zeros, right, over the internet, and then to get to your computer.
Yes. Probably yes. That's the way signals are transmitted over wires.
Right.
As, there's like sort of just a normal voltage that says like, hey, what's up? Like we're actually connected. And there's a high voltage and a low, one being 0, 1. But there are different ways of encoding these things. You could have like several high voltages, several low. So actually each pulse is maybe encoding, I don't know, 2, 3 bits. But yeah, you're essentially correct.
So, okay. So when you're talking about cabling and you're talking about connecting computers together, is that essentially what the internet is? Like the internet, it evolved from the Stanford UCLA experiments in the 60s and all that. And it was released in 92 or 93 under the Clinton administration as public use. But it's essentially computers tied together with big long ass broadband wires, which are allowing us to connect our computer processes and talk and all that. Is that basically all the internet is?
I mean, that's what the internet itself is this system of connections. There's a lot of like sophisticated routing equipment that, actually keeps all these packets going in the right direction. But
right.
Yeah, the internet literally just is a large network of computers. Some of the computers do very different things than other computers.
Right. Well, you have servers on the one end and you have just like the client on the other to be broad, right? Like you have like,
oh yeah, that's pretty much all there is. There's servers and clients of servers.
Yeah, and it's going in between vis-a-vis, I don't know, modems and wires and advanced switching equipment and finding the most efficient route in real time or and all that stuff. It's really advanced. I mean, we've come such a long way since the dial-up in the 90s, right? You remember dial-up when we were really young
I
and
do remember dial-up.
you're like, who's on the phone or who's on the internet? Like I can't get onto my AIM account and talk to Courtney.
Yeah, it was really in my house. It was really like, who's using the internet? Like, don't you know? Like, we might get phone calls. Like,
Yeah. It's and now that phone line doesn't ring anymore. I mean, do your parents still have a hardline phone?
they do actually, but for reasons I won't get into on the pod.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know this was like a sensitive subject.
But I mean, like everybody else, the vast majority of stuff they get over the phone is spam.
Yeah,
Anybody they really want to talk to, cell phone.
I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, my parents, I think they still have it, and but then they got rid of the provider, and then they wanted to switch over to something else. But so they've still got the line sitting there, the telephone's still sitting there in the kitchen, but I don't think it's connected. It's not really. It's just
It gives a sense of security, comfort, familiarity.
I don't know. I
These
like
things
that.
are also important from the devices we bring into our homes.
No, I mean, really, I mean, that's really where this podcast kind of lives, is that intersection of lifestyle and tech. It's and I think it's weird. We're living in a really weird time, and I've talked about it on the podcast. It's the most cliche thing in the world, where it's like, if you leave home without this thing, without your cell phone, you might feel like you're missing like a left hand or something, or a right hand. You might feel like you're missing a limb. It's like, it's just weird. You're like, oh, I need to know something. I don't have my supercomputer with me. How do I find out this trivial piece of
Or like,
information?
how do I get?
Say again?
Or how do I get there?
How do I get there?
Yeah. Although this is something I do, like if I know exactly where I'm going, I know I'm going there, maybe one other place, I know how to get all those places. Sometimes I do leave the phone at home, just
Ballsy.
to, be a little lighter in the pocket.
Yeah. I mean, I truly believe, what do you think about this? We're getting a little bit off the whatever. Neuralink, right? Elon Musk Neuralink.
Actually, is that the like brain computer interface?
Yeah, didn't you see the monkey playing Pong last week with his brain?
I heard about it. Honestly, I don't really click on a lot of news about Elon.
Well, why? He's overrated.
Well,
His
I
bit
mean,
clout's too
that would
high.
be
It's too
something to
expensive.
say.
What's that?
I think a lot of the things he says are, turn out not to be exactly correct, or not correct in the most exciting way that they seemed.
Yeah. Well,
So we'll see. We'll see.
Well, the whole point of the Neuralink interface is going to be to connect the brain and the digital world directly. And I think the initial impulse is to attempt to allow to bypass circuits in the brain, bypass certain neurons, and allow people who are paraplegic or paralyzed to be able to walk again and all that other stuff. And I think that's really a noble cause. But I think the ultimate, I truly believe the ultimate thing is just going to have the chip in the brain, so you can just access your phone or your phone, the internet, without having to deal with a half-pound piece of metal and glass. That's what I truly think.
Man, dude, it's gonna be a long time before I'm okay with that.
Oh, I'm not okay with it at all. Our whole generation is not gonna be okay with it, dude. Nobody's gonna be okay with it. But look, our generation will die. And
I'm not even saying like a philosophical problem, just like the security implications. Like we do much better than we did, but we're really quite bad at making computers secure.
So do you think that cryptocurrency is a secure, all those protocols, all that dual key authentication and all the wallets and all that stuff, is that a secure protocol for sending money across the internet?
Well, so something that like some people miss is that there's sort of like two different levels of security when we're talking about all this crypto stuff. There's like whatever the algorithm itself is and the math behind it. Often the math behind these things are, it really is just like airtight. Like you cannot bust that thing open without just an absurd amount of computing power. Maybe more than could ever be assembled in the universe. Who knows? Occasionally people find little issues in the math over time, and a certain algorithm is not considered secure anymore. But really the much bigger problem is that you have people like me just like sitting, typing onto a keyboard and turning this like abstract math into a computer program. And inevitably, when humans are, this comes back to what I said, inevitably, when humans are giving instructions to a computer, they make mistakes. So it isn't stuff like, oh, like some incredible new math was discovered that invalidated that, like, crypto. It'll be like some guy forgot to check how long a string was somewhere, and now you can control the entire computer.
Right, right. Like some hacker could just figure that out, that weakness, and then exploit it, and then all of a sudden start siphoning out the bitcoins. If you were
Yeah, there are certain kinds of mistakes that get made all over the place. There's a certain language, C, which is used for a lot of like low-level firmware and drivers, and people that are familiar with C are familiar with like the common mistakes that you can make and look for them. And it turns out that there are just so many of these mistakes waiting to be found and allow people to take over systems.
Yeah, human error. I mean, that's one of the things. You're right. When you're writing the actual code, when you're writing the actual algorithm, that's where the error can come in, because you're saying the computer is more or less, or I hate to call it perfect, but it's just executing what was programmed. It just, for the most part, it will do that. You know
I think
what I mean?
pedantic is the word.
Pedantic?
Pedantic.
Okay, so it's pedantic because it just does exactly as it's told.
Yes.
All right, and well, the funny thing too about this whole digital world, and like you're saying, yeah, there's always going to be glaring problems and things like that, just because of the nature of human foibles and error. Is there? Let's think. Well, what about just the more mundane issue of not even of that level of exploit, but what about the more mundane issue of just like everything going digital, and when the digital doesn't work, how stupid it is? Like, okay, last week I talked about this on the podcast last week, but it doesn't matter. Literally, I think I went to 2 or 3 coffee shops that week, and for some reason, out of 2 or 3 coffee shops, at some point, the computer went down, and the barista was like, "Oh my god!" Like, there's some old lady at the one place. The old lady comes up, "Hi, I'd like to have a coffee," and the barista's like, "Oh, our system is down. I don't know what to do. I can't serve you any coffee." And I'm over here sitting there like, just give her some coffee, and just take $2 or something. I don't know. She's like, "I can't open the register." And then something similar happened in another coffee shop that week when I was like, I had ordered a sandwich and some coffee to get the coffee to me. And I'm over there sitting there waiting, twiddling my thumbs on my phone. And I wait like 10, 15 minutes, and I'm like, "Hey, do you guys remember that sandwich?" And then he's like, "Oh yeah, just a second." And then the cook comes out. He's like, "There ain't no sandwich." And then so the guy at the front was like, "We've been having problems with our system all week. I put it in, but he didn't see it." I'm like, "You guys are 5 feet from each other." But this is like, and the thing is that the funniest part is that, like I said, it's Byzantine. Most people, besides yourself, like most people don't have a damn clue about these machines and this digital and software and code. And so they're just like, we can't serve the coffee anymore. The register won't open because the computer won't work. And is that going to be an increasing problem as everything is digitized and there's no mechanical circuits?
Well, let me start off and say, like, when I worked in a restaurant, like the system did go down several times, and that was absolutely not an excuse to like not serve somebody who came in and was willing to give you money. Like, you take the cash, you do the math on a piece of paper, you like write down credit card numbers, like whatever it takes, like you give them the food and you take their money. You don't like not sell things to people.
I know, that's how I was laughing so hard. I was like, "Bro, what are you doing?" But she was like, "I can't open the register," which I guess is sort of fair.
I mean, that's true. Like, you go to a lot of these places and they really can't. Some of that isn't new though. It's
well, it's new-ish, bro. It's new-ish. This technology stuff, this digital stuff's only been going around for 20, 30, 40
technology. But let me address this, and then I'll get to the original question. I think outside of computers, like, humans just have this tendency to create bureaucracy over time.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give you a story. a few weeks ago, I was, browsing Craigslist late at night, and I found this guitar, and I just hit up the dude. I'm like, I want to buy this guitar. And so we met in Guitar Center the next day, but I didn't have quite the correct denomination to pay for it. So I'm like, hey, I'm just going to run right into the Guitar Center. I'll get some change. So I run up to the guy at the register. I'm like, hey, man, can you give me 2 10s for a 20? I will be a customer right after I buy this guitar outside. I need to buy strings from you, but I need this money first to buy the guitar. He's like, oh, I can't. I need the key. Only the manager has the key. I can't access the cash. So computer or not, like,
Yeah.
the guy just can't open the drawer if the manager isn't there. And I didn't buy any strings from him.
Yeah, because of his incompetency.
Well, it's not his fault. It's just the whole organization is not set up to empower like the person in front of the cash drawer to make a reasonable decision about making change for people.
I know, but I feel like it should be because they got so many cameras on that guy. It's like, if he really somehow is trying to steal from the cash drawer, they're gonna figure it out. But yeah, I understand your point. They want to. It's just how power ends up getting bureaucratized, and we just create endless and stupid titles for people and whatever. It's just protocol, top down type stuff. That's why I like grassroots type things. I like anarcho organization. I like do it yourself because you eliminate a lot of that Kafka-esque, like the castle, the trial type bullshit where it's like, or it's like Terry Gilliam's Brazil, where it's like, well, you need to go to room 576 in order to get that document, and the document, and then after that, you have to go to, then you go there, and they're like, oh no, you need to go to the basement floor to get document 6.725, and it's like that, that whole.
Yeah. Your life is much better if you can talk to somebody who actually has a stake in the transaction.
Yeah,
at least your shopping line.
And that's really actually part of the promise of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is a decentralized network. So we have fewer third-party nodes to have to deal with like little managers and banks and little things in between. You got to wait 3 days for the money to correct, all that stuff. That's sort of the coolest part about crypto. Like if you had just had that exchange, for example, if we all were just using Bitcoin, you could have just been like to the guy, you didn't need no change. You could have just told the guy with the guitar, okay, you're gonna hand me this guitar. Well, what kind of guitar was it, by the way? Did you have
I got this. It's honestly not a nice guitar. It's just like an old Ibanez 7-string. I don't even know how to play a 7-string. I just saw it for like $250. I'm like, okay, I need that.
All right, fair enough. 7-string, man. That's interesting. You said Havana, so it's like a acoustic style or?
No, it's an electric.
Oh, okay. I just heard Havana. I thought of Cuba.
No, Ibanez. Ibanez.
Habanos?
No, dude. Ibanez.
I thought that's an Ibanez.
Oh, maybe it is an Ibanez.
Oh
I don't know how to say this. It looks like Ibanez to me,
it's
dude.
like a Latin pronunciation.
Ibanez.
The Ibanez. How about the Ibanez? All right, cool, dude. Yeah, the good old.
But so yeah, I wouldn't have needed change. I just, I would have had to pay the entire $10 in the transaction fee.
Yeah, is that really that bad? Is it really that high at this point on Bitcoin? I think Ethereum.
It was around maybe 5 or 7 the last time I did any Bitcoin transactions. Gotcha. That was a year ago or maybe 2 years ago though.
Yeah, that is fair. That's true. I think there's definitely other networks with lower transaction fees, but that's true. And also Bitcoin is very slow, as everybody's talked about the scalability problem with that and the way that the blocks can only write so many at any given time and all that stuff, the hash rate. But yeah, is this so like distributed computing in general, that is kind of like, it started with the internet, right? You have more than one computer sort of able to work together on any given problem. Is that correct?
Yes. So yeah, we sort of talk about different levels of parallelism, which is, like different tasks making progress on them at the same time. To some extent, it can take place inside a single core of your computer. It can take place inside of like several cores at the same time in your processor. You can have more than one processor in the same computer. And then when you finally scale up a bunch, you can have a bunch of computers in the same data center, or you can have a huge pool of computers across like multiple data centers and so on and so forth. It is a very big deal. I can't say I really do much work that involves that.
So your company at Vectorworks, you make software. You guys don't do a ton of distributed computing type style. It's just projects. Yeah, everybody does their own individual addition to the project, or what? Or is it all in a cloud? Because that's a form of distributed computing where you're just all accessing the same updated files, right?
So we're a decidedly old school style of software company. We make software that is designed to run on a single computer and
Okay.
design, like buildings and, make drafts, that type of
No, I
thing.
meant like when you guys are working on it yourselves.
Oh, when
as
we're working?
engineers. Keep talking. I gotta plug this computer in.
Sure. I guess you could call it some sort of distributed computing. To me, that doesn't really make sense as a way to describe people working on code on their own computers and then, submitting the code. But I mean, if you could do it that way.
I guess you're saying, yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch.
It's more like honestly, it's much closer to like if you say you're in a group and you're like writing some paper or something, like everybody has their own section of the paper that they're responsible for writing, but they're working on the same like Google Docs. Is that distributed computing?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I guess I'm making a stretch here to call that, but it is in a way, but obviously it's sort of an abstraction, whereas distributed computing technically would be, like you said, same set of problems, and they're all the cores are working on it at once, or the different, like it's sort of,
I would think of it more like, like Netflix. Netflix has to serve an incredible amount of video to like places all over the world.
right.
So it has, a place where it lives, and it also has like a bunch of caches that are like much closer to the whatever consumer is trying to stream that video.
Gotcha.
So that to me is like distributed computing.
Right.
The sense of delivering video, but it could also be like, oh, I'm trying to run some like huge physics simulation, and I'm like renting, like computers and just like maxing out the CPU like all over the country. Folding at Home, if you ever heard of that. Folding at Home is a kind of a cool project. I believe it's simulating protein folding. I believe in an attempt to find a cure for cancer, but don't quote me on that one. But the cool thing about it is that anybody can volunteer to help with folding at home. You basically just let them run this very expensive code on your whatever free hardware you have. Using it.
That's interesting, actually. I'm just looking at it right now. That's far out. So it's kind of like if you were mining for Bitcoin, but instead of mining for Bitcoin, you're just doing a service to humanity.
Yeah. Main difference being you're not being paid.
Yeah, totally not getting paid, but they're using your processor to help.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got you. That's far out. One of the world's fastest computing systems.
Yeah, that's an old one too. They've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, since October 1st, 2000. That's far out, man. Thanks for pointing that out. That's an interesting thing to look at. So like, is blockchain, is it a promise of decentralization for value networks, for value transactions, or not, in your opinion?
I'm sure blockchain will turn out to be very useful for certain kinds of things. I gotta say, kind of bearish on the idea that it's going to revolutionize the entire world. Like every decade or so, there are a bunch of different technologies that people, are boosting and trying to say it's going to change everything. It's going to be the next big thing. And one or two of them does, and all of the rest of them don't. And you almost don't think about them anymore after they've faded from relevance. Like, this is not the best comparison, but do you remember like 3D TV?
I was going to ask you for an example. Maybe I remember seeing some ads for it when we were at Vassar, maybe, kind of thing.
Maybe like 5 to 7 years ago.
About when we were at Vassar.
Yeah, I think at that time, maybe like 4K was sort of established at the very, very high end.
Yeah. A lot of people had monitors then. Yeah.
Manufacturers are like, we can't just keep cramming pixels into this. Eventually, people are going to get bored. What we can do is like this 3D. We can like make a TV that looks like it's in 3D.
Yeah.
And they're like, people are going to love it. Like, it's going to totally revolutionize the television industry. Like, they've never seen this before.
Yeah.
And people saw it, and they mostly got a headache, and no one wanted it.
That's true. And I mean, also, I'm just waiting for the comeback of Smell-O-Vision. They need to bring that.
Yeah, that. But like, try and like get yourself into this like real boosterism like kind of mind. and think about like, okay, like, we've been increasing like audio and video, like reproduction technology for decades, but like never once has someone thought to extend it into a third dimension. We're going to be the first to do it. Like, do you want to get in at the ground floor, like when it's still cheap or not? Like, do you want money?
Yeah.
And it turns out, nobody actually wants to smell what a movie would smell like.
Yeah, it's fair. You're right. It's always going to be just a few paradigm shifters that end up winning in the whole bunch. And there's a lot of people who think that there's a bunch of promise all over. I guess it seems like blockchain's not going away, though. It's been around now since '09 or so, or 10. And it's only, obviously, its actual value has increased on the market, but also just like its use has also started to increase a little bit. You can buy a Tesla with Bitcoin and all that stuff. And I don't know. My thing is, I think it's a pretty powerful technology. I can see it as hypothetically a pretty secure protocol for sending money. Sure, you're right. There's scalability problems, particularly with Bitcoin itself and high transaction fees. But I mean, like if I send money to my sister in California with PayPal, I gotta wait. Well, no, actually, no. She might get it, but it might be on credit or something. I don't know. Like,
Why
or
would you
sometimes,
use
or if you better yet, if I get money paid to me in my Venmo account, I want to transfer it to my bank account. It's like, all right, if you don't pay, it's going to take about 3-4 days for this to transfer. Is that all right? I'm like, yeah. So I won't see that money for 4 days. Whereas the promise of blockchain technology is a lot faster, fewer intermediaries, fewer banks, anything in between, clearinghouses in between. It seems to me like pretty awesome. It's almost like as good as cash, although I guess it's a lot more trackable than cash. Like, really, blockchain is the IRS's best friend. It's weird that Bitcoin got this whole reputation as like this black market, like, oh, they're selling things on the Silk Road, they're selling cocaine on the Silk Road with fucking Bitcoin. But like, really, it's actually a lot more trackable than cash. The whole point is that everybody sees the ledger at any given time.
Yeah. So, and I don't mean to just like totally like dump on like, blockchain and Bitcoin entirely. I'm sure it will become very useful in certain niches. But even in the example that you gave, I don't really see how it has a huge advantage.
What do you mean? If you were to get the money in 2 hours versus 4 days, is that not a massive advantage?
Well, you can send money in 2 days. You just have to pay a wire fee.
Okay, so you're right. Okay, so you have to pay.
So what I'm saying is like, anytime you actually have, a significant amount of capital that needs to be used to process this transaction, or you have, actual humans that need to be involved and make sure the transaction makes sense, there's no way that is going to be free. The cost might be hidden, but it exists somewhere. Like wires cost money because at least two people, one at each bank, is looking at this, and I mean, they're figuring out, are you sending money to terrorists? But more likely, like, does grandma really want to wire $100,000 to this random dude's bank that she doesn't know and has never sent money to before? Like, does she really want to do that? Should we like get somebody else involved? I think people don't always think about these kinds of things when they talk about the decentralized future. In a lot of ways, it can be a feature that it takes time for money to settle.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, I don't know. I know that I think that a bigger use case might be a border exchange, like across the world. I think there's a lot more hiccuping and a lot more slovenliness, even still. On top of that, like if you want to send money to Maui, or I don't know, China or Germany, it's a lot slower even than what I've been talking about with Venmo and PayPal or 2-day clearing time.
For sure.
You got to deal with converting money to, and there's actually a project that's interesting called XLM, Stellar Lumens, which is attempting to be a super low fee borderless currency that allows you to transfer US dollars to Germany in seconds or minutes at like an extraordinary low cost. So I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. There's definitely some desire for oversight. My other thing too is that like it's I don't know how the banks, like if the banks are as like, so okay, if you look at like the root of like every single conspiracy theory ever, like the common denominator, one of the major common denominators of every conspiracy theory ever is that, oh, the banks have all this power. The banks have so much power. Like ever since 1913, when the central bank like mafia like took over the US, and did you know the central bank is a private organization and all that stuff. That's always the lowest common denominator of like every conspiracy, right? So if it's true that the banks have like a lot of power, I don't really see them just like laying over and like letting like this decentralized finance just like take over and get rid of the need for a central bank or a treasury.
No, absolutely not. But I don't really feel that they're that badly threatened. In fact, one of the obvious use cases for blockchain that I would see would be banks actually handling transactions between each other. Because when you interact with a bank, there's a whole system of rules that basically protect you. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's not the best in America that it is of all the countries everywhere, but like there are a lot of ways that you could lose money out of an account where the bank is actually required to make you whole. So I really don't think the average
Right.
consumer is going to see a huge value in basically having to take on all of this insurance and effectively insuring their own money and providing their own security for their money themselves.
That's true. You're talking about it's like the FDIC in general. It's insured up to like 100,000 kind of thing per bank account.
Well, so that's in the case of a bank run. I'm talking more about stuff like what happens if somebody steals your credit card and spends it.
Yeah, they're really
There's
good.
almost
They're really
no
good
risk to you.
They're so good about that.
If somebody hacks your bank account and just withdraws all the money, the bank has to fix that for you.
Yeah.
Now, if you give somebody your credentials and they use it, then the bank can tell you to pound sand. But I mean, that's dumb, obviously.
Man, you're playing a good devil's advocate over here. Fucking, you would have been a red coat in 1776, Sam.
I can't help it. I have a pessimistic nature. I think the
Fucking
way
Bennington Arnold. What's his name? Whatever.
the way that things
Benedict.
are have a lot of inertia to them. It takes a lot to change them.
No, it's true. I mean, a lot of you making really good points, man. It's true, like about the whole insurance on the bank account. It's true about how good they are with credit card fraud. Like, I've never had a case where my credit card was stolen or lost where the bank didn't just be like, oh yeah, here's like all the money back, like no problem. Like, it was really weird. Like, I've never had it. Like, I never even had to get a police report or anything like that. They're just so good about that stuff.
And one of the benefits of the current system is that as long as they catch it relatively soon, it doesn't even really cost them that much money to unwind it.
Right.
I mean, if the money got, from this account here and got sent over to like, Joe Blow, like down in, I don't know, wherever his account, they just talk to that bank and they're like, this was fraudulent. Another bank is like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's
Figure out
tremendous.
numbers here, put them in over there, like all good.
All right. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of this.
All right.
Of
A little bit of meat.
the big tech stuff, the big tech centralization stuff. We all know. I'll read a couple examples here that I put together. You and I have talked a little bit about. We talked a little bit about Parler before. Parler being the Twitter alternative, sort of. People can talk to each other. It's less censored on there. People can say less nice things on there about certain groups or whatever. And also, it was sort of cited as a big nexus point on the internet for the January 6th insurrection of the Trump supporters at the Capitol. And then after that went down, well, first it was like Amazon Web Services tried to deny them the server, I believe, right? On the internet, or hosting rather. And I believe that's the order of events. Then they were denied, their app wasn't allowed to get into the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. And then I think they eventually got back online with one of those like Russian companies or something like that, like Cloudflare or Mega or something like that. They were able to get up again.
I mean, Cloudflare is not a Russian company. I believe Cloudflare also denied.
Okay.
Do you know what Cloudflare does, by the way? I think that might be useful for the stream.
No, I don't know. I thought, for some reason, Cloudflare, I thought they were like one of those companies that like often would host things that others wouldn't, but maybe I'm wrong.
Cloudflare is not a host, or at least not primarily a host.
Okay.
Do you know what like a DDoS is?
No.
Okay. I mean, maybe I'm cutting you off a little too early in the sequence of
Well, it's okay.
events.
Talk about Parlor. Talk about Parlor because that's basically the story. Now they still can't get into the App Store.
But this is gonna tie into it. So,
Sure.
like way back in the day, like I mean, it was never easy, like trivial to host your own website. But back in the day, if you knew about computers, you could kind of do it. Like you register a domain, people can like come and see what you got, read whatever. Um, but a very potent weapon that trolls could use back in the day is called the DDoS, which is basically you get a bunch of different computers that use their entire upload bandwidth to send packets at this one server. And
Okay.
if a server is receiving more incoming packets than it can actually process, first off, one of two things can happen. Its total download bandwidth can get taken up and it
Right.
can't see the legitimate requests from people that are really trying to use the thing.
Okay.
Um,
This
but
is
it
called
also, I
this is
mean,
called
it
a
can just
DDoS
crash.
attack. Something like
Yeah,
that.
it's called a distributed denial of service.
Okay. Okay.
It's a denial of service because you're overflowing the server's capacity to handle requests. So it
Gotcha.
can't serve requests anymore.
I
And it's
gotcha.
distributed because you do it in a lot of different places.
Okay.
So, I mean, 4chan, for instance, like did a lot of this stuff back in, I guess, the decade before last. They would just get like, a bunch of random kids, like, teenagers in their parents' basement or whatever. They all like join into the war room and they just start like packet flooding this particular IP address, and it takes the server down. They
Who were
they
their
also,
targets? Who do you remember any of their targets in like '08 or '09
yes, yes.
or whatever?
So you remember the whole thing with Mega Upload, Kim.com?
Yeah.
So they actually first they took down the Department of Justice homepage.
Who did?
Just random angry nerds on the internet.
Oh, in response to the whole
Yeah, yeah.
censor of mega.nz and
Yeah, so they took
kim.com.
down the DOJ website. DOJ, I mean.
Dang.
Um, Also later someone ended up hacking the website, but that's sort of on a different note and like displayed some funny message on the landing screen. Um,
Whatever
so
happened-
anyways, way back in the day, this was a serious problem, and it continues to be a serious threat to really anyone who hosts a popular website. There's always people that are trying to take down popular websites, not even for any real reason, just it's fun, I guess. Now, if you're popular, well-known, and a political page, people suddenly have a real motivation to try and take down the site. So what Cloudflare does as a service is basically sit between your website and the rest of the internet and basically just stand there and just like get hit all day.
Okay. So they're a specialized DDoS attack defense.
Yes.
Why would I have thought of Cloudflare then? I don't know why. Like they don't do any hosting. They're only doing the
I
security.
believe that's their entire business. They were in the news a few years ago because they booted off, I think, the Daily Stormer.
Okay.
And it was a big news story because that was the first customer that they ever denied their services to.
Got you.
And the CEO just like did it in a very impulsive move that he even came out and publicly said he regretted and he really wished he hadn't done that and set that precedent. Fast forward a few years, it's somewhat routine for them to take down, or not take down, but to kick certain websites off their service.
Got you.
So what I'm getting at here is that it's now very capital intensive to put up a website that can't be taken down by denial of service attacks, if a lot of people know about it.
So like right now, Parler is no longer being serviced by Cloudflare for protection.
I don't know exactly who they're using for that sort of protection, but yeah, they're certainly not on Cloudflare.
So there are alternatives, but not. And is the technology not going to necessarily be as good as Cloudflare or something? Is Cloudflare the leading, or are they sort of whatever?
So this gets a little bit out of my area of knowledge.
Gotcha.
There are ways that you can be clever and decrease the amount of resources you need to defend against denial of service attacks. But as far as I understand, the main thing you need is just a huge amount of bandwidth so that you can't be so that you can't be flooded by
So it'd
incoming.
be hard to flood Google because they have probably the most bandwidth.
You can't, yeah, you really can't.
You need to have you have to just build like a $2 trillion supercomputer. Like there's no way.
I doubt if all of the home internet connections in the entire world join forces against Google, they could take down any of its endpoints.
Well, okay, but just give us a little bit of your take on so we had Parler, and I can just name more people like Rogan's being censored on Spotify. They've taken over 42 of his old episodes, including Alex Jones and Dave Asprey, Bulletproof Coffee, and also just some random ones with comedians. Somehow they took off. And of course, we've had YouTube took off the video with Governor DeSantis roundtable recently, a COVID roundtable where we had a few doctors. The doctors were literally from like Harvard and Oxford, but they were saying things like kids don't necessarily have to wear a mask, and YouTube denied the video because it was against their COVID-19 policy. How do you feel about this overall censorship of big tech? And I mean, what's the average person to do about it? Is there anything that we do about it? Are there new trends? What's going on with all this? What do you think?
So I guess there are a few points to be made. The first is, and I don't know if it's ironic, but it's certainly interesting that this is the argument of the left, because it's really more of a standard conservative argument on other topics. But it's one I happen to agree with. It's, these are private companies and private web properties. Mm-hmm. So they're certainly within their rights not to spend their own money to host stuff that they don't want to host.
Right. I see that. I mean, but it's sort of like as they become the de facto common forum or public forum for because especially as the app stores end up centralizing more and more content, you can only get Google Play approved apps. You can only get Apple Store approved apps.
Exactly.
They're effectively And what are you supposed to do? Form a new phone company? I'm going to go ahead and form a new. Oh yeah, we're going to have that. We're going to have the orange phone, and everyone's going to somehow adopt it. I mean, it's sort of. I see what you're saying, but there's very much monopolies in this space.
Yeah, and that's what I was sort of getting at with this whole spiel about Cloudflare and the service they provide and how capital intensive it is. You could kind of just say that and leave it at that if there were a reasonable place to go. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't, if you have some sort of political ideology that's outside of whatever the current Overton window is, you really can't host a website for that isn't constantly going to be under assault from attacks that are actually not legal to perform, but they're basically impossible to track down people that did it, at least in any way that would meaningfully stop them. And I think, this is something that now, of all people, conservatives are talking a lot about. At least the ones that I think are a little bit more reasonable are saying, what this really is an antitrust issue. It should not be the case that 2 or 3 organizations can basically decide what is and isn't acceptable to publish on the internet. And I think really we ought to be able to agree with that, regardless of how we feel about Parler in particular.
So what would you say? I'll play devil's advocate here and play Jack Dorsey and say, hey man, I don't want anti-Semitism on my platform. I don't want Nazis talking about how, Jews are the issue. I don't want KKK members coming on here and saying, the white race is the best race and all this other stuff, because those words, are tantamount to violence, since they can so easily lead to violence. So I just don't want that on my platform, dude.
I actually think that is okay for Jack Dorsey to say. Although I really didn't hear him saying much of that until it became clear that Trump was not likely to win, the re-election.
Well, how do you feel about that in particular? The fact that the social media companies, in some odd way, coordinated to silence a sitting president of the United States. As much of a rascal as he was in lots of ways, and you can argue that he was certainly making false claims, I guess. But even still, they censored a sitting American president. They had more power than he did, in a way.
I mean, again, I do think individually it's okay for them to do that. What's not okay is the fact that so few of them had to come to the same conclusion to basically boot him off of social media. You see the distinction I'm making here?
Yeah, you're saying
If I'm, you
if
know,
there were
like,
if there was a zillion companies and 7 out of the 20 of them were like, we don't want them, you'd probably be like, all right. But it's like because there's like 5 major companies and they all decided like in tandem, you're saying there's a trust issue there, antitrust issue there.
yes, I think, and it's, I don't even know how it would make sense to like break up these companies. I mean, certain Facebook, you could see how it could become 3 different platforms that were totally, detangled from each other.
What, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram?
Yeah, they might own something else too. And I mean, Google, it's a little bit less clear, but I think really step one would be for the government to stop approving all of these mergers and purchases of huge companies combining themselves together. I think that's really the only solution you can have to this issue. And I think, I don't know, I don't want to like call people naive because I don't necessarily, I mean, I think I'm kind of smart, but I'm not like a genius or anything. But I have to wonder if how much people have considered this system of control that's being built and what it will be like the next time it's advantageous for these companies to cater to the other side. Because it will happen. American politics goes back and forth every decades.
Right.
Things might be going pretty well right now if you're just slightly left of center Democrat. But it wouldn't take much to change for these decisions not to suit your worldview anymore, if that's who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could picture a world where, say, BLM, they've been very support. I mean, they've been supportive. The tech companies have been supportive of BLM. They haven't kicked them off or anything, as far as anyone can tell. But I can see a world where maybe BLM, the riots just became too violent, or say they started to attack like the Google Cupertino like headquarters or whatever. If that happened, all of a sudden they're going to start censoring BLM, and the left might be like, "What the fuck, man? What are you doing here?" Because I think that's sort of what you're getting at, right? Is like,
yeah, exactly. This is my cynical worldview. I think these large tech giants have sort of stepped out of their, like isolationist position that they had for quite a while, at least outside of matters of, them making more money. And they've now stepped in and decided to take a more active role in politics. But it seems to me that really all they do is sort of pander to whatever team currently appears to be winning.
That's what it would have seemed to be at this time.
So if the team changes, there's this, there's now this precedent for taking down things that are misleading, inciting violence or whatever. And they also get to decide what is misleading and inciting violence.
Well, that's what I think is the most.
I'm just saying, like, imagine, like, like Donald Trump Jr. or whatever becomes president, 8 years from now?
Okay.
And he does it with like a solid lead, and he has a clear political mandate to do, I don't know, whatever like goon like behavior he wants to take the country into. Really, my guess is that, Twitter, Facebook, I think they would sort of harumph about it at first, and then they would kind of be like, okay, what do we have to do to get some good deals from this administration?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean,
the cat's out the door. It's not going back in.
I just worry about how much power they really have now. I mean, Google controls so much of the market share of just the internet space. It's almost insane. And I just don't like how, and we all know these devices are listening to us and all that and tracking us. And it's like, it's just scary. It's scary for someone like myself who is doing a podcast with a lot of free thought and free speech type stuff going on and free questioning. I don't think my podcast has any hate in it, but I can still say again.
You ever read your advertising profile?
Oh, that's so interesting. No.
Google, there's a place you can click. It's really easy. They give you a list of every single category that they show you targeted ads for.
That is so interesting. And it's Google, right?
Yeah.
I would love to know. It's probably, I don't know. It's, I think they probably think that I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what they think anymore. They probably think I'm a conservative though, because I keep seeing like just like stupid like survival stuff and things like that. Like I'm like, I don't need this, but I don't know.
I looked at mine pretty recently. To a large extent, it was pretty spot on, but there were some like odd ones. Like, it seems to think I'm like a married woman.
Oh, but actually, I have ad personalization turned off.
Oh yeah, so that won't work for you.
So I turned that off, and I also turned off tracking on Google Maps. Turned all as much of the stuff off as I could, because I don't know, not really a big fan. I mean, they're still probably taking more information than I would hope, but um, I don't need ads. I don't need to buy things I don't need. I need to just buy things that I already know that I need. So it's kind of a strange. Why have you not turned yours off?
Why have I not turned mine off? Um, you know, I would have to read about it some more. I don't think it actually prevents Google from collecting information about your browsing habits. It just stops the ads themselves from being targeted. And I actually use ad block anyway, so I don't actually see ads on the internet.
I guess we're running a little low on time right now.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Is there any other topics you want to hit before we sign off for this episode?
Oh, well, there's a lot, man. We could go all day, but so what do you think the best solution is? I would love to keep going with lots of stuff, but I think the best thing for the listeners would be to talk about just real quick. What is the best solution for privacy? Is it just to not care too much? So it sounds like your ad profile is on, you have an ad blocker, and you just don't worry about it too much. Or is there a way is it best to go into your phone and try to turn off as much of that stuff as you can? Apple iOS just premiered this new app tracking technology. Actually, it's pretty controversial. This is coming out in actually in the last couple of weeks, it's coming out. I don't even know if it's updated on my phone yet. That it actually, every time you open an app, it'll say, or not every time, but it'll literally say, do you want to give this app permission to track you? And you can actually turn that off. It's very controversial because these app companies, these big social tech companies, they need your data to sell to advertisers to make money. It's actually a very controversial thing in the tech world. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel about targeted advertisements in general and how to handle it?
So I do take some steps to try and maintain as much privacy as I can. So I guess there's a similar thing on Android or even like in the browser these days. It'll say like such and such wants to access your location. So I think to myself, like, is there anything useful they can provide to me if they have my location? If the answer is no, I just hit no and I check don't ask me again every time. That stuff I kind of doesn't matter that much. A website can tell from your IP address roughly where you are anyway. I would say the two big ones are if you're not already using Firefox, use Firefox. Enable the strict tracking protection, enable ad block. Ad block also prevents a lot of tracking. Other than that, as much as you can, don't sign up. Certainly don't sign up for new social media sites and think about which ones you could live without and delete.
Do you have Facebook on your phone? Do you have Instagram? Do you have
I don't have any of those apps. I actually, I do have an Instagram, but I haven't logged into it in several years. I have Facebook just because I have a fair amount of friends that I actually have no way to contact other than Facebook. So I haven't been able to pull the plug on that one yet. But aside from that, I do not have any social media that uses my real name.
But you seem to be implying that, like, when you use Facebook, you go through the browser. You're not using the app.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I think that's pretty advantageous. It's very annoying that actually with Facebook, though, it's very hard to use the Messenger in-app or through browser. I don't even think it's even possible. I don't know. And I'm pretty sure it's basically impossible to use Instagram without getting the app. So they're very tricky. They're trying to get you.
Yeah. Instagram started to be a thing like back at the time I was already getting disinterested in Facebook. So I actually have never really used it.
I don't see very much use for any of these things for a public or a private citizen in general. I mean, other than contacting people. Unfortunately, because I've got the podcast, I've got other projects, comedy projects, other sorts of projects, art projects. I kind of need to use these networks to try to push my message. But thank you for your advice, man. I have to get on Firefox.
I have one more.
Got one more for us?
I don't know if I said this. If you don't already have it, download and install Signal. Use it for all of your communications as much as you can.
So, but you're not using Signal, right? When we text, we weren't using Signal, were we?
I mean, I don't demand that people use Signal, but if you have it, I always prefer to use Signal. Telegram is okay too. There's some like trade-offs between the two that nerds can get into, but Telegram is also pretty good.
Nice, man. Well, it's interesting though that you did. It's not super integrated though, I guess, yet with your phone because you didn't know that I also have the Signal app. I guess you would have, because you probably would have texted me on Signal if you had known, right?
I mean, real life is always kind of messy. Like, just because someone has Signal installed doesn't mean I can assume they will get notifications. So usually if I'm going back and forth with somebody a while, I'll be like, hey, do you have Signal or do you have Telegram? Can we move this chat there?
Got you. Yeah, my parents got on there. They're very paranoid individuals. So I still call them paranoid. Rude.
You should
They're concerned about
encourage all
privacy.
your friends and family to do it.
Yeah, Signal's cool, man. And Telegram's cool. I like this. I like the encrypted stuff. I like the more decentralized stuff. I don't like the big powers that be, like monarchically high priests, like telling us what we can and cannot say. Even though I get their point, man. I'm not into hate. I'm not into Nazis. I'm not into white power. All that shit sucks. But at the same time, I don't want them to one day. They're going to censor this. What if they're like censor this podcast because I talked about their COVID policy? That's the type of shit I'm concerned about. Like, it's like, don't question our authority. What's that?
It could certainly happen. Not necessarily because some human made, a silly decision, but just because an algorithm is just searching for certain, sentiment analysis, like keywords.
Right.
Maybe the fact that you say COVID and Joe Rogan, same podcast.
We're screwed, man.
Get taken down, put into the manual review queue.
It is very Orwellian, man. It's very much like, it's not only deleted, it's like it never happened. That's the other thing cool about blockchain is like the ledger is supposedly immutable. You can always go back and take a look and see what was there. But Google can make Alex Jones disappear. They can make Karen Anthony disappear too if I'm not careful. But I mean, I'm not really doing Alex Jones shit. It's just you got to look at it starts with the extreme cases, and that's what they take out first. But like you said, it could always swing to the other side. It could always get more moderate. You never know when the censorship's going to end. But thank you for taking the time out of your day, Sam, and enlightening us a little bit about computers. I would love to do it again, man, sometime. Maybe you can come up here.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. I mean, maybe we can do it in person this summer, maybe another Zoom, however it happens. I'm sure we can think of more fun things to talk about for now.
Well, we got the whole rest of that list I sent you. We didn't even get to the half of it. So next time, I guess we'll have to talk a little bit about machine learning and AI and all that stuff, all that fun stuff.
All right. Looking forward to it.
All right, dude. Good to see you. I guess I'm going to sign off, but yeah, man, I'll talk to you soon. I guess on Signal.
See you later, dude.
See you, bro.
Peace.
But that's it, man. That's it. I hope you had a good time. I hope you got some practical words of wisdom from Sam there. Interesting takes on targeted advertising and what apps to not have on your phone and, all that stuff. How to throw a wrench in the old social media framework and how to be less tracked and less profiled. That's sort of, I guess, important, probably, right? Privacy, human rights, good stuff, right? Good stuff. But yeah, that's it. And that's that, baby. Next week, tune in next week. We've got a special episode on 420 with my friend Tony Geromino. Next week, he's going to talk about the future of video games, VR, PS6s, PS7s, Super Smash Bros, and all the rest of it. Maybe we're going to even talk about cloud streaming services and how that could revolutionize gaming. So look for that next week. In the meantime, please like or subscribe on YouTube, Deep Homie K. For the podcast, look for the Deep Homie clips on YouTube where we're going to take the highlights of each episode and throw up 5, 10, 15-minute clips on there, shorter bites. Follow me on Instagram, Deep Homie K. Follow my boy, my co-host, Paul Wood at Paul Makes Stuff. And that's it, and that's that, man. That's all there is to it. Deep Homie Guide in the 21st century. Remember, guys, always keep it deep.